There is an epidemic happening in men today. Weakness and comfort has taken place of strength and purpose. Masculinity is labeled as toxic, and women are now the ones who define what a man is more than men are. Weak fathers are raising lost boys who are at risk of never being initiated into manhood. We've grown farther and farther from God, which led us to become weaker and weaker. The man within fights back by introducing men to their true strength and purpose through God. So join me, and together we can restore true strength and purpose in men.
Hello, and welcome to the Man Within podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. So glad to have you guys here. If this is your first time, I'll give you a little rundown. The Man Within is all about men helping men. As Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so too does man sharpen man. So what the Man Within wants to do is help men in every area of their life, helping them find their purpose, helping them find their path, helping them find their gift, helping them in their faith, their fitness, their business, their career, everything. So we are really passionate about helping men step up and become the man that God called them to be. Well, I'm not going to waste any more time. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are talking about purpose. This is part one of a series in purpose. So I'm going to be breaking down purpose, what it is, how to find it, and what it looks like for you in a few short videos. So yes, there is indeed a purpose for you. And yes, you do indeed have gifts that are to be used for that purpose. It's a divine purpose. It's a divine gift. God created you to be unique. You are the only one. You are one of one. There's no one else that could fulfill that divinely unique purpose that God designed for you. So in order to get the most out of this series, in order to get the most out of these videos, make sure you're actively listening. Get rid of distractions, grab a pen and paper, take some notes. This took me a long time to learn, so you're probably not going to pick it up the first time listening to it, and that's okay. So just make sure you're actively listening and allow God and the Spirit to speak through you and give you that wisdom. So at the end of each of these videos, there will be a quick little exercise to complete that will be designed to help you figure out God's purpose for you and what you can do to start your journey to becoming the man that God called you to be. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the first video. This is part one of a series on purpose. Purpose is a very complex issue that every man will ask himself at some point in life. We will all wonder, what's this all for? What's my reason for being here on this earth? The problem is that we look for answers in all the wrong places. We seek meaning and direction from the world instead of from God. Another problem is that we're not asking questions at all. We're just obediently acquiescing to the world and letting the world dictate our steps without looking to God. But God gave each of us a purpose before He created us, according to Ephesians 2:10. If life feels meaningless right now, I want you to know that you do have a purpose. You do have a loving Father that wants to reveal that purpose to you. If there is breath in your lungs, there is purpose for your life. The only source of purpose is through God, because God, He made us to serve Him. We are made from God, for God. We are in this world, but not of it. Everything we have, including ourselves, including our purpose, belongs to God. Everything was made by Him for a purpose that includes you. So if you're stuck or lost in life, there's a good chance you haven't been living God's purpose for you. So what is your purpose? How do we find it? Well, sometimes it helps to understand the true meaning of what something is by first looking at what it is not. So today we're going to start by looking at where you are and how you got here before looking at where you want to go. You can't put the cart before the horse on this. You can't skip steps. You can't start at the finish line with something as important as your purpose. And I'm telling you from experience, if you try to, you'll do what I did and you won't get to the root of the issue. and you won't be able to implement what I am teaching you in the rest of these videos. As I said, it took me a long time to understand this. So take your time with this. You won't be able to fully understand and commit to your purpose if you're not getting to the root of the issue. So let's go ahead and see where we are at. Today, we're going to take a look at what purpose is not by seeing how far we've gotten way off track and how we've confused God's definition of purpose with a worldly definition. So I've broken this down into 4 purpose killers. These are 4 worldly paths that will take a man away from what God has intended and lead him to a place of meaninglessness. So the first purpose killer is what I call the conventional route. This is the most common route. Everyone's heard of it. It's pushed down our throats from the time we're old enough to go to school, because school is the first step on this route. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You're told to go to school, get a job, save your money, and maybe retire at 65, and then you can enjoy life. Then you can explore these amazing gifts, this blessing of life that God has given us. But you got to wait until you're 65. You got to be a legal slave to an employer. You got to be addicted to a paycheck. You got to stay inside your comfort zone, stay inside your comfort box until you're 65, and then you can live. But when you do that, you're alive, but you're not living. So on the surface, the conventional route doesn't really sound all that bad. It sounds kind of correct. And that's why it's called the conventional route. But if you do well in school and choose a good major, there is a very good chance that you can find a high-paying job and live a pretty comfortable life. But there's actually a lot wrong with this kind of thinking. This is the route that they want everyone on. But we weren't created to be just like everyone else. If you pursue someone else's path, life is going to feel meaningless because there's no meaning for you on that path. There isn't a purpose for you to be on someone else's path. Our path was uniquely created for us by God. According to Psalm 139, verse 16, which says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." It's not right for us to take a path that isn't meant for us. It's not right for us to allow the world to tell us where to go and what we should do. Who do you really think has your best interest at heart? The world, which is inhabited by the enemy, or your Father in heaven who created you with a unique purpose? We must take a step back and think about who we've been allowing to guide us. The conventional route doesn't care about purpose. It cares about comfort, which is inherently anti-masculine and anti-Christian. Do you ever wonder how or why our society has gotten so soft nowadays? Do you ever ask yourself, where did all the men go? Do you ever look at yourself and see if you're acting like a man? Well, guys, the reason we're getting softer is because we're being led down a path of comfort. We're being led away from growth, the natural path that God wants us on. But God's path requires some pain, some sacrifice, some responsibility, things that men need in order to grow. So when you go down a worldly path, not only are you going away from God, you're going away from your masculinity. This is exactly what the enemy wants. However, as men, we need challenge. We need risk. We need a little sacrifice, some responsibility in order to grow. God's path isn't conventional because there's a lot of risk and uncertainty. It's not conventional to the world because he operates from a supernatural plane. He operates in a godly way. But God's formula for growth is short-term pain now for long-term pleasure later. The enemy's formula, it's a lot more tempting because the enemy's formula is short-term pleasure now for long-term pain later. There's no growth in that. In fact, it's regression. You don't go back to where you started. When you chase the world, when you chase the enemy, you don't go back to where you started. The enemy puts you, the world's going to put you, and maybe even God is going to put you at a place that's worse than where you started. Because guess what? You got a lesson you got to learn. So our soft society does everything it can to make men believe that they don't have to suffer any pain or take on any risk in order to get the life they want, which really is the life that God had intended for you. This idea that if you go to school, get a good job, you'll be set for life. But I'll tell you what every man is left with after achieving worldly success. They're left asking themselves, what's next? Which leads me to the second purpose killer. So the second purpose killer is not having a vision. It's a lack of vision. A worldly purpose will only get you so far. Notice how the conventional route doesn't really tell you what happens after you get the job. Notice how there's actually a lot of vagueness. There's not much specifics in go to school and get a job. You should be asking yourself, well, what should I go to school for? What kind of job do I want? What kind of life do I want to live? Do I even want a job or do I want to work for myself? How will getting $100,000 in debt help me achieve my goals? Notice how these aren't questions we're told to answer before we go into that life-changing decision of going into a 4-year school. There are plenty of courses that are I mean, a fraction of $100,000 that can teach you how to make money without a degree. In fact, a lot of those courses will teach you way more than anything you could learn in college. But this is the problem with not having a clear vision. Without a clear vision, you don't have a target to hit. And if you shoot at everything, you'll hit nothing. A man who can't define his own vision will accept whatever the world gives him. A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. This is where I was at. It took me 2 degrees, a master's degree, and thousands of dollars of debt, and 3 years in a corporate job that made me absolutely miserable before figuring out this route wasn't for me. And like most people, I was trying to fill a void in my life with more worldly things that I thought would make me comfortable. Money, women, status, whatever it was, whatever worldly idea of success. But that is how the enemy wins because he knows that God's route is very uncomfortable. In fact, it's probably the most uncomfortable thing you can do. But the joy and the fulfillment are found in God's journey. The requirement for anything of value is a little pain and sacrifice. The enemy in the world lies to us by telling us we just need to remain comfortable. But as a man, I reject that. Have you ever met a man who had to sacrifice a lot to become successful? Have you ever met a man who aspired to sit in a cubicle and stare at a screen for 40 hours a week until he died? Or would this man rather go on adventures, do mission trips, take on risks, leave a lasting legacy, be the main character in his own life, be the man that his kids will talk about for generations? Which man do you think he'd rather be? Guys, the only way to fill the void in our heart is with God. We're all born with a God-sized hole in our heart. Our job is to use our free will to fill that void with God and God alone. Unfortunately, most people choose to fill the void with the wrong things, which brings me to the third purpose killer. So the third purpose killer is idolizing things of the world, idolizing the wrong idols. Now, there are a lot of good examples of bad examples that the world encourages us to look up to. For men, our role models are guys that somehow got rich and spend their time flashing money and women to make it seem like they have the most amazing and fulfilling life. But let me ask you this. Do people who are truly happy have to spend all their time telling people how happy they are? Do the most fulfilled people care about what others think of them? If you look at Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, for instance, they do a lot less bragging than someone like Dan Bilzerian or Andrew Tate, and they have a lot more money. If you follow men who are on a path to death, where do you think you'll end up? Jesus told us to remain humble and not to be like the Pharisees who wanted to let everyone know how good and pure and righteous they were. God wanted us to pray in solitude, according to Matthew chapter 6, verses 5 through 15. When you are using your gifts, meaning the divine gifts that God gives you, and you pursue God's path, He'll make sure the world sees you when it needs to see you. If you try to receive blessings before your time, they become a curse. It's so hard for us as humans to endure temporary pain. So we keep looking for temporary pleasure again and again to try and fill an eternal void in our hearts. But everything in this world, including the world itself, is temporary. What the world promises to give you is actually a counterfeit of an eternal gift. So, for example, a house, a car, women, money, all of these things are things we believe will bring us joy or peace or love or fulfillment. But eventually, the excitement wears off. So we keep looking for something bigger and better. But how many houses do you have to buy before you realize it's not the size of the house that matters, it's the foundation? It's not the quantity of women you bring into your life that will help you. It's the quality of one godly woman that will help you stay on the one true path for you and become greater than you could have ever imagined. Truly, fully become the man that God called you to be. We were made for God and to serve God and to have only one idol. It is impossible to serve two idols. It is impossible to serve two masters. It's impossible to find an eternal gift in a temporary place. Either we're fully devoted to God and we seek fulfillment through Him, or we're a slave to our own desires. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. If you are led astray from God, the enemy will try to give you heaven on earth. But if you are a man of God, faithfully standing by Him, standing firm in the faith, the enemy will do his best to make it hell on earth because he knows he can't bring you with him. Your job is to be so devoted to God that you become the kind of man the enemy is afraid of. We're all born with a God-sized hole in our heart, and it can't be filled with things of the world. The enemy does his best to make us believe we can replace God with material things, which brings me to my final point, and that is we don't think we need God. As men, we're very often taught to be independent and self-reliant. More so today, I see a lot of men, I see a lot of things online, men telling other men that they are alone and no one cares about them, especially if they're not providing anything. Now, having been a part of this kind of, let's just call it hyper masculine community, I've learned that they make some good points, but they're misled. The biggest thing that is missing in these communities is God. And that's how the enemy lures us in. Not by doing things that are clearly wrong, but by leading us down a path that seems right, whether it's the conventional route or groups like this. So there are some good points that this community, this hyper masculine community, has brought up. Men should learn skills that are needed to stay prepared and protected. And as the leaders of our household, our family is going to depend on us for protection and direction. With that comes a lot of preparation. There's a lot of responsibility. It's a big burden on our shoulders. One of the privileges of being a highly skilled man is the freedom to take care of your earthly needs without the assistance of another man. In other words, you can learn how to care for some of your human needs, but your needs as a man goes well beyond growing your own food and knowing how to fix a car. We need to be fed in our soul and skilled in our spirit. We are never truly independent because our whole purpose for being here depends on having a relationship with God. We are never fully self-reliant because if we rely on ourselves when we are sinful by nature, we will most certainly be led down a path to death. There will be plenty of times when we as men will have to pick ourselves up and do the hard work ourselves. But when God needs to do work on someone, He tends to put them in a season of solitude. We can try to rely on ourselves all we want, but the only way to find our true selves is through self-sacrifice. Luke chapter 9, verse 24. So now I have a few questions that I want you to spend some time thinking about before we head into the next part of the series on purpose. Take your time on these and think through them. This isn't something you want to rush. This isn't something that you want to go out of order. So make sure you have something to write these questions down with. Number one, which path have you been led down? Which worldly path have you been led down? Number two, which one of the four purpose killers that I mentioned are you guilty of following? Number 3, where has that path gotten you? Number 4, what happens if you keep following that path? And number 5 has 2 parts. Who encouraged you to go down that path? Who do you think influenced them? So these are some questions I want you to spend some time thinking through. Just spend some time thinking about what path you're on, how you got on it, what it's gotten you, and where it's going to lead you to. And when you do that, it should open up some new perspectives for you. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you gained any value from this, please like, subscribe, and comment any other topics you'd want to learn about. I look forward to seeing you in part 2 of the Purpose series. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.